This is an interview I did with Alan Futerman and Walter Block regarding Hans-Hermann Hoppe's attack on Walter Block, and of course the subsequent back and forth, and Israel versus Hamas, and all these different issues. Not to mention what it means to a libertarian or an anarcho-capitalist, and all of the ramifications thereof. If you think it's useful to you or you enjoy it, please consider hitting the like and subscribe buttons. It'll really help me a lot to produce content like this in the future. I hope I can. Enjoy. Good evening. It's nice to see you again, Walter Block. It's also good to have this interview because things move so quickly in the libertarian world nowadays. What with the attacks back and forth, and with the rebuttals and with the responses, it's difficult to keep track of sometimes. But I really wanted to get your opinion, and of course Alan's opinion about, Hans-Hermann Hoppe's attacks. They seem to me unhinged. I mean, that's how I want to start, and it almost seems to belittle the problem, because it's a deadly problem. It's deadly serious. We have a really big war going on. There's massive potential. I mean, people have died already, but there's potential for much bigger death toll. And I think to bring it down to a personal level seems to belittle it, but not really, because we have two big spokespeople, people who, in Hoppe's words, represent Rothbard and libertarianism. And it doesn't seem to me crazy to say that it's important to hash out some of these differences, right, at a personal level. So this time I will ask first, Walter Block, how did you feel when you read the Hoppe's article? How did you interpret it?
Well, Hans Hoppe was a buddy of mine, and we're several times co-authors, and we're mentioned, as he says, as two of Murray Rothbard's followers, main followers, if I could put it that way. And I was very disappointed, not so much with the content, the substance, where he disagreed, and that's fair game. I mean, I disagree with him, but I was really perturbed by the lack of scholarly presentation, because when you come down to it, we don't have guns, we don't have tanks. All we have is scholarship.
Yeah.
And what scholarship is supposed to do is to get to the truth of matters. And in order to have scholarship, you have to have some sort of scholarly language. And if you're going to engage in name calling, idiot, freak, moron, I forget the word he uses, then you're leaving off scholarship. And how can you get to the truth if we don't abide by our principles? It's sort of like, I don't know, an electrician. If he wants to solve something, he's got to be careful of electric current.
Yeah.
And if he's not careful of electric current, he's not going to be a good electrician. He's going to get electrocuted, and he's not going to do a good job. The same with a plumber, and the same with a carpenter. Well, it's the same with us as scholars. We have proprieties and ways of dealing with each other. I tell you, when I criticized him on other issues, and we agree on some things and on others, I'm very careful to say he's one of the preeminent libertarian theoreticians or Austrian scholars or something like that. And in the response that Alan and I wrote, we try to say, our learned colleague or our learned debating partner or something like that. We were trying to be polite and adhere to scholarly proprieties. And I greatly regret that he did not do that.
Yeah. I couldn't believe it personally. It was actually pretty shocking to me, because if it was a personal email, right? So let's say Mr. Futerman, Alan, if you got an email from someone saying what you've done is this terrible and you've represented us terribly, change your ways publicly because I want you to change it, right? That would be normal, right?
Absolutely. I mean, yeah. But it's something that apparently, as with Hoppe and other
Mhm.
libertarian anti-Zionists, this situation is too
Mm.
emotional for them to tackle it in a rational fashion.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
And so, apart from the content with which we, of course, disagree, and our response
Yeah.
tackles every one of the points that Hoppe mentions, the language says a lot
Yes,
about
yes.
this perspective.
Mhm. Yeah, the language was, like I said, scandalous. It was crazy. You know, I wouldn't expect, I would maybe, I mean, even if it was, say, Bernie Sanders commenting on something that Walter elected, right? Uh, I wouldn't expect him to speak like
He
that.
was a friend of Walter Berman.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And so this cuts deep, right? Cuts deep to him, obviously. He feels personally slighted that Walter Block would say this. And it gets to my next point, which I think is a really deep one, is that he, how can I say, projects his own values, not just his values, but how he interprets other people's positions and their value in a society or in a group. He projects this onto a person who is dead and a person who has never publicly attacked anyone like this. And we all know who I'm talking about, Rothbard. You can watch an interview with Rothbard or a lecture, or you can see him debate with people or talk to people. And every story I've ever heard or read of Rothbard uh, is the same, right? So he's the same in interviews as he is in lectures. He was bubbly, excitable. He would have confrontations, but they would not be at the personal level like that. He would say, "Oh, this is terrible, or that's terrible," but he would meet halfway with anyone to discuss issues. You discuss them. You don't attack people like that, especially not in public, without their prior consultation. It would be different if he had a long discussion with you over, a month or something, saying, Walter and Alan, you guys are crazy. I think you're wrong. Let me try to convince you. But it seems, as you said, he's the personal level here. It seems to be as a general rule here. Libertarians, I mean, I go to Lou Rockwell and I read a lot, but the tone has changed dramatically from what it used to be to now. It's, I feel embarrassed to recommend to my family articles from Lou Rockwell, and my family are all over the place politically because it reads like, I don't know if you've ever heard Daily Stormer. It's like anti-Jew. That's what it sounds like. It's beginning to become like that, and it's oh the Zionist crazies, oh,
Yeah.
what's up with the media supporting the crazy Zionists? And it's, well, I mean, everyone has a different opinion and it's an important issue, right? So,
Absolutely.
yeah, and it's one of those things where the tone really sets the dialogue. And not just that, but it sets the ideas, right? So if you come out accusing someone in such a vicious fashion with so much venom in your mouth, how are you going to be interpreted by people reading it? And no doubt many people read this, and I've no doubt people on the anti-Zionist, anti-Jew, really, the anti-Jew uh, perspective will say, "Oh, I see, even Hoppe, right? Yeah, yeah. Hoppe's friends with lots of Jews. He was a libertarian. Even anarchists say, the Jews are evil. Look at them. They're even fighting Block. That blockhead. That kind of. That's how I he's the one throwing it into disrepute. He's the one taking something that's supposed to be rationality and throwing it completely into emotion.
Let me add a few things to
Yeah.
what you just said, Annie, which I think are very important. That I think there are 2 points which make this even more crazy and unbelievable, frankly. One is that the enemies of Israel are very far from libertarianism, very, very far from
Yes.
libertarianism. And they are not moved by Murray Rothbard or John Locke. Okay, that's point number one. Because
Mhm.
at least let's say let's assume that Israel is fighting against Rothbardiana or anarcho-capitalist
Yeah, yeah.
land. Okay, okay. So you could actually think, okay, so well, the
Mhm.
libertarians should support Rothbardiana, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But the Gaza Strip under Hamas is a bit far from
hmm
Rothbardiana.
hmm
But the second point is that if you read the main, let's at least I regard as the most important thinker on our particular interpretation within the tradition of libertarianism and classical liberalism in general and Austrian economics. Ludwig von Mises.
Yes.
Ludwig von Mises was a Holocaust survivor that escaped the Nazis, and the enemies of Israel, Hamas, are admirers of the Nazis.
Yes, very vocally so.
Right. And if you read Omnipotent Government, which is a very important book by von Mises, there is an entire section on anti-Semitism. And it's very illuminating, that section, because it portrays the same mentality that is being defended by these libertarian thinkers. And I mean, it's completely insane.
It is.
So I think, yeah.
I wanted to add something to what said. It's very strange that libertarians diverge on many other issues, not just Israel versus Hamas. We diverge on immigration policy. Should there be open borders or not?
Yeah.
We diverge on abortion. Ron Paul was pro-life. Murray Rothbard was pro-choice. And yet never, ever did we even come close to name-calling or viciousness. And Ron Paul and Murray Rothbard are our leaders. I mean, you can't get more high credentials as a libertarian.
Indeed, yes.
Another one we disagree on is voluntary slavery. There's reparations to blacks for slavery. And there are other issues where we disagree, and some of these are very, very important issues. And yet there's no venom. Indeed. I've never heard any venom on any debate, and all these things have been debated. But in this issue alone, which is very strange, all of a sudden, it's not just, well, you know, you make a good point here, but this point outweighs your point or something substantive, but it's nasty.
Yes.
And this should be put on the table and discussed, or we should try to understand why it is.
Sorry. I mean, the issue, I think it cuts, this goes on to my next point I wanted to make, is that I think us libertarians and anarcho-capitalists can be very arrogant sometimes, to say we don't fall prey to propaganda, we don't fall prey to, you know, illogical or emotional arguments, we are rational. And it means that we can be less than humble sometimes. And, you know, this is why we have private discussions. This is why we hash things out, because we have to. And to do so in public, you have to have thought about your argument, and you kind of present it, you know, modestly. But the propaganda, I'm not an academic, so I'll be very frank. The propaganda against Jews and against the homeland of the Jews has been constant and just steadfast, and has been so well planned over such a long time and so coordinated that so many people who are completely different in so many ways, in so many political and you know, their religious ideology, it doesn't make any difference, right? They are so captured by this mentality that to them this is the only legitimate mentality, right? That you know, Jews invaded Palestine, or whatever they want to call it. I mean, we'll get into this a bit later, and you know, just like they do in New York, and just like they do in all these cities, they go there with their money, and they go there and they just cheat people out of their contracts, and it's clearly bad, the whole deal. It's a bad deal. And so it seems to be, in looking at this issue, people come with various histories and backgrounds, but they all have one thing in common. They feel personally slighted by Jews. And, you know, I mean, before I converted to Christianity, and I'm not Catholic or anything like that, I was like, yeah, you know, God replaced, you know, even the Jews were abandoned by their God. You know, this was my opinion, but it was complete propaganda. That as well was complete propaganda from the religious side. And when you read the Bible, there's nothing like that in there. God makes explicit promises. So even from that perspective, which is what's justified so much hatred to the Jews so long, during World War II, before World War II, there was the silent pulpits, as they call it. All the church leaders, people who were parts of the community, you know, they didn't denounce it. They said, oh, well, the Jews did this, or, they killed the Messiah, or whatever they say. And, oh, we replaced the Jews anyway. So this is the mentality. The mentality is that you can just replace the Jews, and it's the best solution. That's the mentality. And the idea then that the Jews have a place that not only that they were inheriting for a long cultural heritage, and genetic, but also that they cultivated, right? So they homesteaded to the nth degree, to the nth degree. We're not talking about, Sally and Joe in the middle of nowhere with a farm, making and flourishing as close as you can get to a really good democracy in the Middle East. I've lived in the Middle East, lived in 2 countries in the Middle East. It's not the kind of place where that kind of thing will naturally flourish. It just isn't. It's tribalism. There's lots of fighting. There's lots of families fighting families, and so the propaganda campaign against the Jews, in the face of everything you see that the Hamas has done or that they do, is so pervasive and so strong and so constant. It's like a drumbeat. It's a drumbeat, drumbeat. People just get worn down. I don't know what it is. So I want to ask both of you, now that people have come out, because really they've come out, right? As I would say, very well, it's anti-Jew in my opinion. I don't like the word anti-Semitism. It paints it a bit nicer than it is. It's anti-Jew. It's Jew hatred. I was this way as well because I was covered by this propaganda. How do you feel looking at people to be rational and intelligent, and they don't have an excuse other than they fell prey to like a constant barrage of propaganda? How do you feel about both of you?
Let me take a few points. Because what you raised, Danny, is very complex and it has many different angles to tackle.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the first one I would say is that it's very easy to be an anti-Semite or a Jew hater or whatever. Now, why? Because people hate things about themselves, about the world, about their experiences, and it is often good to find a scapegoat in order to try to take away one's responsibility or to try to find sense in and meaning in the bad things that one sees on oneself or the world in general. What happens with the Jews is that there is an entire menu upon which people can choose why to hate them. So some people will say, well, I hate the Jews because they killed God. Others will say, no, I hate them because they poison the rivers and use Christian blood to bake matzo. Others will say, well, no, because they control the government. Others will say, no, they control the media, they control the financial system, they did this, that, whatever. So it's very convenient. If let's say someone comes here and says, I hate Danny, and people will ask, why?
Why?
But if someone comes here and says, I hate Jews, well,
there's no why.
Right. The why is going to be like, okay, I asked why, but it's
I have
like
my own personal reason, right?
Okay, exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
I know why, because they killed God. And
Yeah.
another will say, no, of course he hates the Jews because, I mean, they control the US government. Why not? And so that's number one.
Yeah.
Number two is that Jew hatred is a different type of hatred to others, which, for example, let's say racism, right? Racism is a form, it's hatred, but in a sense, it's the racist despises the object of his hatred.
Yeah.
But with respect to the Jews, it's not only that they despise Jews, they consider Jews as a cosmic enemy, as an evil force, as the source of all evil in the world. So it's a form of demonization. It's not the same as hatred. It's hatred plus something else, which is like, it's like a historical battle between good and evil.
Yeah.
That's point number two.
Yeah.
So this makes very easy to be against the Jews. Now, why? Because you can find whatever reason you want to hate the Jews. And second, because it makes one feel important. I'm not fighting anyone. I'm fighting the Jews. I'm fighting the real evil people, the real source of evil in the world. So it makes the hater to feel like he's really into something. Okay.
Yeah. Before Block, before you respond, I want to quickly mention this because I mean you mentioned it's a great point. We as Westerners, because we have Judean history and Judean Christian history, we are self-persecuting, right? We view ourselves as being guilty for most things. This is our natural inclination. And more than that, we have, the Bush wars and all the other stuff prior, the Iraq war and all this other stuff, which we as Westerners we see lots of suffering and we naturally want to blame someone, right? Blaming ourselves is what we want to say, but really it's difficult, right? So, oh no, you see, it must have been some group behind the scenes making the US government do this. And even, I mean, Al-Qaeda, when they stated what they were doing. No, no, no. It must have been the Jews doing it to make it seem like the Arabs were doing it. And then then the Jews made the United States government attack them. So really, it's their fault. And we have this guilt, right?
Look, one thing, Walter, on the subject of Judeophobia or Jew hatred, point number 2 that I mentioned is what explains what you just said. Because if it's a very convenient mind model or method in order to identify reality and to deal with reality, which means that every time you see that something bad happens, or there is a problem in the world, or there is a war or whatever, you already know why it happens because it's the Jews that are behind it. So it's a way to understand reality. It's an entire worldview. You see, and so at the same time, when something bad happens to the Jews, it cannot be bad. It either cannot be bad, or
they did it
if
to
it's
themselves.
bad, it's ultimately to be blamed on them. And so that's how it works, basically. Sorry, Walter.
No, no, please go ahead.
Okay, I wanted to put in a good word for Jew hatred. I'm glad you laughed, because I mean this as a joke.
Yes,
obviously.
I know.
Right now, people are complaining that there's a lot of acerbic people hate each other. We're uniting everybody. we unite the Nazis and, the queers for Palestine.
Oh no, yes. Don't get me started.
We are uniters. I mean, everyone now can be on the same side, anti-Jew. I mean, I'm being silly here, but the more serious point is that all sorts of people who would hate each other if they saw each other. I mean, there are neo-Nazis in the U.S., and what is their view of Bernie Sanders or AOC? Mutual hatred. And yet they can unite on one thing. Israel is evil, Jews are evil, we run Hollywood, we run the banks, whatever. So it's something that we have to take cognizance of. Obviously, I'm not in favor of this. I was just silly.
Of course, yeah.
But this is a phenomenon of interest.
Yeah, yeah. It's an unfortunate turn of events that we have everyone uniting at the same time, just when Israel needs friends, right? And people to understand, to look from a friend's perspective, be like, well, it looks bad from the outside because of how people are portraying it. But this gets into my first point, because this was your first, I suppose, rebuttal of Hoppe was, this is paraphrasing here. He fundamentally misinterprets the conflict between Hamas and Israel by misunderstanding and distorting Israel's claims while uncritically accepting Hamas's assertions. He overlooks the role of Hamas' hatred of Jews and Israel in originating the ongoing conflict. And I mean, we sort of covered part of it here, but I could go in a very long diatribe or a monologue about the hatred, not just hatred, it's a systemic and systematic and a legal hatred of Jews in the Middle East. I mean, Iran is probably number one, but any caliphate, any, anyone who reads the Sunnah and believes it, anyone who links the Sunnah with the Quran would be, well, it's I could go into reading it, what exactly it says, as you've quoted many times, right? So all Jews must die. Christians who are friends with Jews, you must not associate with them. And then once we've killed all the Jews, then we can focus on the Christians. That's the mentality. This is not a caricature. People refuse to accept that this is not a caricature. This is an actual worldview of a very large amount of the population in the Middle East, especially in Hamas territory, because they are so brutal with destroying any other viewpoints in their territories. And that gets into my second focus, which is this whole hideous conspiracy theory, which it's distorted something that was somewhat true, but there's reasons for it, is that Israel or Netanyahu, whoever, deliberately made Hamas to attack Israel so they can take back all that they lost, apparently. All right, so there's a couple of things to unpack here before I ask a question. All right, so it kind of assumes that Israel lost this territory in war, right? This assumption assumes that Israel didn't have Gaza, right? And didn't have Judea and Samaria, otherwise called the West Bank. That's the assumption behind this. And it's so completely historically false. Israel gradually won it after being attacked constantly and constantly. They gradually won these places back. It's like, well, you attacked us from here. We're going to take a little to make sure you don't do it. And again and again and again. Israel had these places. Israel, the people of Israel are the ones who constantly said, we want peace. We want to make a deal. We want to make sure you guys can live with us in peace. We'll offer you territory. We'll offer you all these things. And it was basically prior to Hamas, it was the PLO, and prior to them, it was Islamic Jihad and wherever else. They always said, no, they were the ones who shot it down every time. And this is something I think that gets to the heart of this whole misunderstanding of the conflict. I mean, it goes far further back.
Well, take the Golan Heights, for example. The Golan Heights, when it was under Arab control, was used as a launching pad for missiles and bombs and this and that and the other. It's a little higher heights, small mountains there, and they were raining bombs down on Israel. And then we had a little fracas, and the Israel ended up controlling the Golan Heights, and they're not leaving. And I would say justifiably so. Look, if country A invades country B and B wins the war, and at the end of the war, they're occupying some of country A's property from which they launched missiles, well, the answer is obvious. Look, if Monaco was launching missiles at France, France would not reciprocate. What they would do is they'd send a note to them. Hey, say, what happened? Was this an accident? We'll try to fix it up. And then Monaco says, well, it wasn't an accident. It was on purpose. And we're going to keep doing it. There'd be no more Monaco.
No.
And
absolutely.
And somehow this doesn't work. It would be the same thing if Vancouver, British Columbia were sending missiles to Seattle. The U.S. would be very polite and say, well, Canadians, have you messed up and we'll fix this? And if Canada said, well, this is just the first of many more, there'd be no more Canada. And somehow this doesn't operate in the Middle East.
I'll quickly make a mention to this. There's something I think you mentioned there, and I think a lot of people misassociate, or can I say, misconstrue what Canada in this case, or what Monaco is. They view it as the people of Canada or the people of Monaco. Now, Monaco as a place would still be there, right? I mean, this is not what we're talking about. We're not saying they would just level the place and kill everyone and make everyone leave. The name would change, specifically because now a different security company would be running it, right? And this gets to the kind of heart of my issue with libertarians or anarcho-capitalists and their issue here, is that what's the alternative, right? I'd love to ask both of you. This is my mental image. There's so many different ways you can do it. You have, let's say, big brother gives you someone, his relative, a piece of land in the middle of nowhere, right? And there were some fights or whatever, and big brother won everything, right? So little Mister, we'll call him Einstein, goes there. He sets up a school. He sets up a place to educate people. He sets up farming. He makes this place worth something. Now, whether or not Big Brother was wrong in this circumstance or not doesn't justify killing Mr. Einstein after making the place fantastic, because that's all you can say. Israel's a pretty fantastic place. The issue I have is that Hamas and all these different organizations, they're not attacking the UN. They're not attacking United Kingdom. Look, I mean, United Kingdom was the first place to say, we're going to divide this place up between Jews and Arabs. They were the ones that said that, right? And after that, the United Nations had the partition plan of 1947. I think it's called General Assembly Resolution 1812. Right? They're the ones that did it. Why isn't Hamas attacking them? You know, they're the enablers. They're the ones who decided that this is going to happen. No, no. You see, the Arab countries at the time were like, no, we want to kill all the Jews. So why the hell would we give them a place to live? Like, we're systematically driving them out. Why would we possibly want to give them anything? 1%. 1% wouldn't have been, if it was, oh, the partition was unfair. They didn't care. Right? The peace treaties that Israel wanted to sign were incredibly in the Arabs' favor later on and subsequently, but the mentality was so ingrained that no, our destiny as a nation of Arabs or of Sunni Muslims or Shia Muslims is that at some point we're going to wipe them out. So why give them anything? Like, how would you portray this to people?
Well, let me analyze this subject from a different perspective.
Yeah.
I don't think it, of course, but let me explain my viewpoint on this. It's like the problem is not primarily the how they interpret the situation. It's what it's motivating the enemies of Israel, not who they are or where they are. Because, for example, Egypt and Jordan and those countries signed peace treaties with Israel before the Abraham Accord, like 30 years before. Egypt at the end of the 70s.
Yes.
So and those were mortal enemies of Israel at the beginning. So something happened in the middle, and something happened with the Abraham Accords, where countries that didn't even want to recognize Israel are now doing business with Israel. And there are many Arabs in the Arab world that support Israel, but they are not as outspoken as Israel's enemy. And then you have peace between Jews and Arabs in Israel. Israel has a 20% Arab population. And what do you think they do all day?
They're very happy there.
They try to kill Jews. No, they do their own stuff and they move. I mean, they have their own businesses and they have their own interests and they go to college and they fund a company and they go to a TV channel and you name it. So what is the difference? I mean, inside of Israel, take Israel as an example. You have someone, let's say an Arab, that has family, relatives, let's say in Ramallah or in Gaza. And what's the difference between those Arabs? The difference is fundamentally their moving ideologies. In that sense, what is it? What's at the core of this ideology? It's the rejection of Jewish presence in the area. It's the intent to kill, to destroy, and never to build their own societies. That is the main point behind the enemies of Israel. They want to destroy Israel, not to build anything, because when they try to build something, they only oppress their own people. For example, take Hamas in the Gaza Strip. What do you think there is there? A paradise of laissez-faire capitalism, entrepreneurial innovation? No, it's an oppressive regime. It's a medieval regime. So the entire spirit behind the opposition to Israel is the rejection of Jewish presence in the area, with or without a state.
Yeah.
And so all I can say about that is that the only way for peace to exist, we know it because it happened with Egypt, with Jordan, and with many other Arab countries, which is when the enemies of Israel understand that they won't defeat Israel militarily, that they won't be able to kill all the Jews because the Jews will defend themselves.
Yeah.
And so they have one more thing. Once they understand this, they will be able to move forward and to make peace. And that's it. One more thing. Peace is not love. It's mutual respect. It's, I don't want to kill you and you don't want to kill me. And that's it. Because some people have the idea that it's gonna, I don't know, like John Lennon, like imagine something like that, right? Well, let's be realistic. I don't think that's gonna happen.
No.
But what can happen is for people not to kill each other. That's should be the goal.
Before you start, Block, I'll just make one of my perspectives on this is it's not so much their, this like willingness not to fight each other. It's the Egyptians and Jordanians finally were like, okay, we have to choose between loving our own people, taking care of our own people as a state, right? What's our purpose? Is our purpose to take care of the people in Egypt or take care of Jordanians? Or is it to kill Jews in this circumstance? So there's this choice they have to make. The leaders have to be like, well, we're either going to be North Korea or we're going to be South Korea, right? This is the difference, right? I mean, what do you think, Mr. Locke?
No, I think you're making an excellent point. Golda Meir once said, as soon as they start loving their children more than hating us, there'll be peace. But right now, they hate us more than they love their children.
Yeah, yeah.
And she also said something, we can forgive them for killing our children, but we can't forgive them for making us kill their children.
Yes, yes.
And Bibi Netanyahu said, if Israel put down its arms, there'd be no more Jews and no more Israel. If the Arabs put down their arms, there'd be peace.
Yeah.
Let's look at what happened in 2005 in Gaza. In 2005 in Gaza, there were Jews living in Gaza, and the Israeli government compelled them to leave. They resettled them, but they compelled them to leave. And now this was a Palestinian state, not really a recognized government, but a quasi-government. And what did they do with their cement? Did they build factories? Did they build desalination plants? Did they try to become the Hong Kong of the Middle East? No. They built rocket launchers in hospitals and used the people there as shields. They embedded themselves there. They built tunnels from which they would jump out and assassinate Jews. So what's going on here? What's going on here is there's a lot of hatred. And then the libertarians who oppose Zionism somehow come up with the idea, well, it's really their land. They homesteaded it. They didn't homestead it.
No, they did not.
Libertarians are supposed to be fans of John Locke and Murray Rothbard and Hans Hoppe, who have done good work on theoretical stuff about homesteading. But the Arabs, most of their land was uncultivated, because uncultivatable, because it was swamps and deserts, and they couldn't make the desert bloom like the other people could. There are these two things that are operating: Jew hatred and misunderstanding of homesteading theory.
Yeah, just on a quick note, I mentioned it before I started the interview, that Jews have every right, legally, in my opinion, to leave their property or their land or their inheritance to other Jews. And this assumption that you have to trace the exact person from, Moshe all the way to, whoever, Moshe number 2 now, is completely crazy. It seems like a straw man just built up to say, oh no, you see, they can't do that. That's impossible. So there's no inheritance. There's clearly an inheritance. As I mentioned to Walter Block, I can leave my house if I want to my church or to the church's descendants if I want to. I can say, this is the property of my community, and it doesn't matter if it's I'm saying it's personal private property which then be inherited by that person. Let alone the fact that private property is there because of the Torah. But anyway, again, that point is you can leave your property to other people, to a group of other people if you want to. I mean, in an anarchist capitalist perspective, in a libertarian perspective, communists have every right to leave their property to the state if they want to. That's their personal right. And as a collective, they have a right as well. So do corporations. We have this everywhere. We have this perspective everywhere, except on this one issue. There's one issue. All the libertarians don't try to be libertarians, become, communists. They become collectivists. No. Our collective is right. That collective there, they didn't have this right. This moral equivalency is so completely wrong here, because we, as I say, not we, many people in libertarian society will condemn Jews for doing what they would defend other people doing, right? We would defending the undefendable, right? Right. Even if you don't personally agree with it, that's irrelevant. That's irrelevant, and it's about who initiated the aggression, who started the violence in and itself isn't illegal, right? It's about initiation. That's a big one here. So this gets to my second one here. This I'll read. This is the second rebuttal. Despite his contributions, this is Hoppe, to Austrian economics and libertarian theory, Block and Futerman find his understanding in these areas to be lacking, which is crazy. His view of libertarianism is as a conservative cultural enterprise, that's my interpretation, leads to problematic conclusions regarding property rights and social issues like homosexuality and holding alternative belief systems. But in this case, it's his like a cultural perspective and then projecting that onto all of, you know, libertarianism, saying homesteading doesn't work in this case, where it clearly does, saying, you know, it's rich coming from Hoppe saying, oh, no, so you got to make live and let live or something, but, you know, take them and drop them out of helicopters, forcibly remove them. If, there was one quote here. He says, I'll have to paraphrase in his 1991 book. If a person does not have an understanding of economics, you cannot be considered a full person. And I forgot. I mean, when I read the quote in your response, I was shocked. And it made me think I have to go reread some of his books. Where was this coming from? Because you think, you know, you even mentioned, you know, you think, oh, okay, he's probably talking about, you know, the condo association or something. But that's not what he's saying at all.
Right.
When I first read that, we were buddies then, and I said, look, Hans, this is a typographical error. Just because they're homosexuals or,
Yeah.
I don't know, communists or whatever, you can't exclude them from society. You can exclude them from your condo, and they can also exclude you from their condo if they engage in pornography or whatever. And I said, it's sort of like a typographical error. Please correct this. And oh, no, he stuck to it. He really means this, which means that he's not a libertarian, at least on that issue. Now, look, don't get me wrong. He's made great contributions, not only to Austrian economics, but to libertarian theory. But on this issue of excluding people for having the wrong beliefs from society, that's preposterous. And yet he's predicating his attack on Israel on the basis of libertarianism. He's not really a libertarian on those issues. He's more of a conservative or something, some sort of error going on here.
Yeah, I'll just make one more mention to this. This is the opposite side of this, where libertarians, we will like justify in many ways, like defending the undefendable. We're naturally inclined to say, okay, well, you know, even if there's people who view animals as not anything to be protected, there's nothing we can do, right? So if it's their property in their little country, let's say each neighborhood is a separate country now because that's how it becomes. We naturally inclined to say, well, you know, as long as they're not hurting people, they're not aggressing against people. But Tom Woods got to a really good, interesting point once, and he said, you know, he was discussing it with his daughter. His daughter loves animals, and she said, well, isn't it wrong? Isn't like torturing animals for sadistic purposes wrong? You know, and you know, he said, well, you know, in libertarian theory, and you know, he thought about it, and he mentioned, you know, I'm not going to put words in his mouth, but this is what he said. And so I made a note here about it because it's important to me, because I have children, and I think about the world which I give to my children, what I think is right and wrong. And I said, on some topics, there's more important things than libertarian theory, right? So you can't put theory first and then say life has to now, you know, accommodate the theory. Because there's, in a purely libertarian society, I cannot see libertarians or moral people in general accepting that someone in the next door house brings dogs over and tortures them to death, right? This would be considered wrong. We would make a common law, we'd make some sort of law, we would have to say this is wrong. It's wrong, like just like attacking people just because you think you own their land or they might have taken it, bombing them, killing them, taking their children, killing the elderly, kidnapping babies. This is not in any way a legal representation that would be considered valid. It cannot be. And then to defend that system and say, oh, you see, the other person, he was wrong because he did this other thing a long time ago. It's so utterly like lopsided. The argument is so wrong, as you would say, dead from the neck up. It's completely wrong. And someone who justifies that, it's crazy. You're justifying the most deepest wrongs and evils man can commit. It's the equivalent of saying North Korea is fine because they had a war a long time ago. It was an unjust war. So everything they do to their own citizens, everything they want to do to everyone else around them, it doesn't matter if they launch missiles into Japan's sea, if they want to threaten Japan with nuclear weapons. That's fine. Libertarians in a libertarian society would never put up with that. We wouldn't. In the Monaco, example you gave, that's a perfect example of it. We wouldn't, because it's wrong. Right?
Yeah, but let me add something to what you just said. The point two I mentioned about Jew hatred explains so.
Yes.
Because if you're fighting absolute evil, if you're fighting a cosmic battle,
Yeah.
and you're fighting evil, everything's permitted. The end justifies the means. You can do whatever you want. And even if you do something that is horrendous, well, it had to be done, because otherwise, it had to be done. So this is not just something that you see among Jew haters only. In this context, even you can take anyone on the intersectionality camp, right? And they use exactly the same argument. They say, well, if you fight colonizers, if you fight colonialists, if you fight oppressors, if you fight, etc., all bets are off. You can do whatever you want, and you have so it's but this is the type of totalitarian mentality that allows people to think that they can do whatever they want, and in that sense, there's nothing that one can say.
Yeah, so I think it's important to make a moral ground for this, right? So because we like to talk about theory a lot, and there's also a theory of morality, right? So it's the equivalent of saying, a man kidnaps people, he shoots a bunch of kids in a school, he races away, he has hostages on him. He says, did I kill these people? But I'm going to be happy to kill more. In fact, I'm going to a place now to murder everyone inside of this mall. And the police are chasing him, right? And the police are like, he has hostages on board. There's like 5 children with him. Or there's like whatever. He gets out of his car. He has his guns or a bomb or whatever. And he tries to run into this mall. And there's like 1,000 people there. It's clearly not right for the police not to act, right? So they send the SWAT team in. Maybe he goes into the mall. The SWAT team goes in. Hostages die. But he gets taken out. That is what we consider a moral call. They have to act. They have to. The state, regardless of whether it's legitimate or not, or a gang, right? We'll get into that in a small bit, has a legal and moral obligation to act on these circumstances. And as unfortunate as it is, I think the example you gave is really extreme of shooting through, the child. Where we're really talking about is a person who has stated they will murder more people. They're happy to do it. And they're going to kill these hostages as well. They only have them to make sure they don't get shot. They're not negotiating anything here. This is not a hostage situation where the negotiator comes in and says, your wife left you, maybe we can get you a nice car. This is not the situation. This man says, I will murder all of these people, stay away, or I'll kill these people. What is the police, what are they to do? the moral course, yeah.
I wanted to add to what Alan said.
Yes.
If Israel could do whatever it wanted, the war would have been over in 6 days. There wouldn't have been any more Gaza, no more Gaza. It'd just be over. Instead, what they do is, instead of dropping bombs, they drop leaflets.
Yes.
And the leaflet says, we're going to bomb this place because there's a launching pad for rockets in this hospital. Get out of this hospital. Go away. And then they bomb it.
Yeah.
The reason that the war is still going on after 6 or 7 months is because Israel is very careful to try not to have too much collateral damage. Because if they weren't concerned about that, the war would have been over in 6 days or maybe 6 hours. Israel has the capacity to make that war go away in 6 hours. But they don't want to do that. On the other hand, they can't allow Hamas to stay in Rafah with 4 more battalions. Because if they allow that, then the Hamas will have won. And ISIS and every other group will now kidnap people and immerse themselves in civilian populations and use them as shields. No, if Israel doesn't get rid of Hamas, they will have lost the war and they will have been in mortal danger. The whole country would have
Yeah.
been in mortal danger. And here you have Biden, the fair weather friend of Israel, who is stopping certain bombs from coming into Israel. And now the New York Times is saying, well, there's precedent for this. Republicans, even Ronald Reagan, has reigned in Israel before, so it's no big deal. But the difference is
Yeah.
that when Reagan did it, or when Eisenhower did it and kicked Israel out of the Sinai Peninsula, Israel has already won the war,
Yeah.
or was in a situation where they were just about to win the war. Where the present situation is very different. There are still hostages that Hamas holds. And if they can get away with this, they promised more October 7th. So it's a very different kind of a situation. And I think that Mark Levin had a magnificent diatribe or a magnificent speech excoriating Biden for stabbing Israel in the back.
Yeah, there's a couple of points I'd like to make here. The first one, I mean, first, of course, you're right. And I'd like to add to that, as someone who cares a lot about military history, I love military history. It's very interesting because society decides to go to war sometimes. It's not the state, it's the society which generally decides this. So the first point is Israel's war at the moment has defied all expectations. So every military expert, every analyst said this is going to be a bloodbath for Israel and for the Palestinians. There's going to be the horrendous casualties. For one, because Gaza is quite possibly the most densely populated piece of land in the world, right? That's the first issue. Of course, sending in troops, all this problems with that. But getting to my point, Israel has maintained pretty much a 1-to-1 ratio, which is basically is the amount of civilian or non-combatants, right, and combatants, which is completely unheard of. Completely. It is completely unheard of. And the fact that they did it in these the most difficult circumstances with all the international pressure is a testament to the fact that the IDF has a very strict protocol on everything. When mistakes happen, those people are punished, right? And the second point is the whole thing with Rafah. With Rafah, it's also the border to Egypt. And Egypt doesn't want weapons coming through, but it's a big border. Egypt has its own problems. They had, Muslim Brotherhood, which overthrew them, and then they got them out again. They don't want the Palestinians over. But at the same time, Egypt also doesn't want to have their people sending support and weapons and bombs and all these things to be used against Israel because they have a peace treaty with Israel. So it's a difficult situation for them. So the whole thing with Rafah is that it's the largest corridor they have for any smuggling. I mean, smuggling also happens from Jordan, but to a large extent, it's almost entirely from Egypt. And they have to do something. What is Israel to do? I can imagine hiring, they want to discuss many things, hiring a private military company to take the place and hold it, administrate, which clearly won't work because it'll be a bunch of basically white guys standing there looking like the oppressors, right? The optics will be terrible. And the second one is, let's get Arab nations to take part. But the Arab nations don't want to be publicly part of this because it'll be like touching a leper, right? They can't agree with anything that Israel does because if they do, their own people will uprise. I mean, Jordan is facing an uprising. Lebanon is barely existent as a state. Egypt has been overthrown before, and they worry about it. So now they say, no. Much like when Gaza was presented to Egypt as we will give this to you. Israel was like, we'll give you all of Gaza. Please take it. They clearly don't want us there. Look, we don't want to, occupy the place. Egypt was like, no, no ways. You cannot give it to us. Even if you paid us, we would not take it from you because it's a hot potato. And it just so happens that in the region, it is a hot potato for various other reasons, which if we have another interview, which I'd like to talk about some of these issues in depth. That's the one thing I think we forget. Yes, people die, but there are so many other wars happening right now, which libertarians just say, the Russians are justified, or, Ukraine is justified. The amount of death on both sides in that war is exponentially different. Not to mention Turkey's little private campaign against all Kurdish people. I don't hear libertarians complaining about that. The Kurds are being massacred. They still are. They have been for a long time. This isn't a historical thing. Turkey goes into, parts of Syria and just takes out the Kurds. What do we hear? Crickets, nothing, silence. Not to mention, it's rich that Hoppe, Hoppe, who lives in Turkey, says this stuff against Israel. He lives in an incredibly oppressive country, which says, if you oppose us in any way, we will kill you, which is what happens with the Kurds. So this whole moral equivalency thing, saying Israel is bad because look at these dead people. There's dead people everywhere. You're guaranteed two things in life. If you survive birth, you'll be born, and then you will die. Not even taxes are guaranteed. I mean, you could be Biden's son. He never pays taxes. In his case, there's no taxes, right? But people die. It's part of life, and part of war even more so. It's the complete disproportionate attack on Israel. As you mentioned, it's because they view Israel as an ultimate evil, right? It's this.
Right.
Also, in the opposite side, many people who oppose Israel view it as like the private destiny of mankind to root out historical evil. And they think, oh, historical evil, the only ones that survived is the Jews, right? The Jews were historically causing these problems. And there's this long-running animosity, which is like, in the Arabs' case, not just all Arabs, but certainly Shiite Muslims, a destiny of all Muslims to correct this problem. So it goes beyond a person's life, or even your child's life. For many, for hardline religious people, there's plenty of hardline religious people in the world. You can't ignore that they exist, and that they will value their destiny of their society or their religion as being far more important than the life of their own children, even the life of their own children. And so I think it's rich that you have people commenting on this whole situation, but not saying Turkey or any of these other countries is causing problems. And
Yeah, well, it's the double standard.
Yes.
Of against Israel. It's one of the features of anti-Zionism to use one standard with everyone else and one standard with Israel. But it's all part of the same thing, which is the idea that the Jews are the worst, and anything against the Jews is permitted, and nothing by the Jews is permitted.
Yeah.
In the sense that they cannot defend themselves, and every defense by the Jews will be interpreted as an aggression.
Yes.
So basically that's how it works. But apart from saying so and explaining, there is not much that we could do and we can do. For example, in this case, we wrote a reply against Hoppe. And it depends on people if they are going to read it or not, to make up their minds on the basis of the evidence and the facts. And
I guess you did a couple of points here. Just before this is something you wrote, Walter Block. Hoppe, he acts like he's never read your book, right? I doubt he has. I doubt very much he did. And then, even Doug Casey in an interview I saw, he was having a conversation. He says, "Oh, they wrote this book, Moral Case for Israel or something." And, yes, right? And like, if you mistake the title of that book, you have not read the book. You have not read the book. Yet people claim, and in the same breath, Doug Casey says, "I've never seen Walter Block be intellectually dishonest like he has now." This is about that book. There's an interview like on YouTube, and that's shocking to me. And I'm like, what? And here he's saying, "Oh, this book is called The Moral Case for Israel." And it's like, it's not what it's called. For one, because you guys are very specific.
Who said so, Doug?
Doug Casey.
I've met Doug a few months ago. I often see him. I saw him. We met a few times. I met him a few months ago, and we discussed the entire situation. And he was he understood our position.
That's good.
What was this?
That's good. Oh, I'll have to send you the YouTube. I'll put it in the description when I upload the.
We'll write an email. I mean,
please.
I'm sure that he won't excommunicate us.
No, of course. He was saying, that's the thing. But they were discussing it in a private, with you, Walter Block, in a private, thing. But the idea then that someone can miss the point of your book is crazy to me, because you guys go to great lengths to just say, okay, this is the criteria which we're setting for this book. And of course, Hoppe are clearly complete, doesn't just ignore it. Either I hate to say it, but this is my perspective, either he's lying or he has the worst memory ever if he's read the book, right? So if he's going to attack you, he'd be like, well, they wrote a book about it. Let me read the book and see what their stance is. But it does not reference it at all. So, oh no, you see, because libertarian theory says this or this. But he himself, as you mentioned, diverges from this so much in all of his writings. We just took it as like he's a great theorist and he says some things which are controversial. But I don't know, that was a difficult point for me to swallow that someone can read a book like that and say, oh, it's about the moral case for Israel. It's about a very specific legal case to say that it's good. Now, I couldn't get to the last point, but we won't really be able to discuss it much. But the massive financial incentives of the various players involved in continuing this and funding Hamas to make Israel pay. There's various corridors of gas and oil which are proposed and are currently being produced. Israel has an enormous gas. They discovered large amounts of gas, natural gas, off the coast of Israel. And of course, if Hamas makes it that Gaza is now a legitimate state, they can claim a lot of that. And of course, who funded Hamas, right? Turkey and Iran, right? So big players, and they all want to, Iran wants a pipeline. They want to go all the way into the Mediterranean easily. And then, of course, there's various other corridors which have been proposed, like the IMEC, which is in India, and it goes through, various places. I don't know how much you know about this, but basically the Hamas-Israel war completely threw that off. It would have completely gone around Iran, but now that doesn't exist anymore. And Russia has a massive incentive. Right? There's all the oil in the Golan Heights, which is a militarily defensible place. Right? It's the most military defensible place. It's a large hill. You can see everything from it. There's a reason why Israel is there. Right? They're not going to leave. Syria says, "Oh, it's ours," and of course, Russia was the first to say, "Oh, no, no, you see, it's the Syrians one." Just as the Russians are making treaties with Syria to say, "We'll have bases on your land." Now there's tens of thousands of Russians and tens of thousands of Iranians in Syria and in Lebanon. They're there to attack Israel. Everyone's going to take a share of it. I mean, there's only that explanation that these historical enemies, Russia, Iran, and Turkey, are fighting for the same side. It has nothing to do with the people involved. It has everything to do with their own personal, as each country has its own financial interests, as well as, saying, "Oh, no, they're the issue, even though we're doing crazy things. No, pay attention to the Jews over there." It's like a magic trick. And they feel like they can get everything, and they can blame the Jews for everything, and they can still make the money.
Yep. Well, irrespective of the alleged or possible financial benefit destroying Israel, the truth of the matter is that it's not motivated fundamentally by this subject, if it exists at all. The fundamental motivation is the destruction of Israel. Because even this massive gas field that you mentioned, Leviathan, and there's another one close near the shore in Israel on the Mediterranean. It was discovered recently. A few years ago, like 10 years ago.
Indeed.
And before that, the enemies of Israel still wanted to destroy it. So I think that basically the main point is that one.
Yeah, I think there's the purchasing of new friends is a part of this. Look at all the Russian anti-aircraft Russian weapons. Russia doesn't want to make friends with people who might get attacked, but in this case, there is this incentive, right? Nord Stream was destroyed. There's still the Turk Stream. People don't talk about that. The Turkey still has a pipeline through it, right? So Walter Block, I have one last question for you and for Ellen. Is this should be I think a interview on itself, but if just a quick, how would you see alternatives to the current military conflict? For example, if you have this one group and another group, the private security company of Group A, that's Israel. They have now a private security company, right? So there's no more government, there's no more state involved. It's a perfectly anarcho-capitalist now. But people of Israel still want a homeland, so they have a homeland, and that's security company A. And then the chaos which is all around them wants to destroy them. What would be legitimate, or the expectation of security company A, which is contracted to secure and protect its citizens?
Well, as a libertarian, I'm much more interested in what is just rather than the pragmatics of how would it work, although I certainly am interested in it. This book, we purposely named it the classical liberal case, even though Alan and I are anarcho-capitalists. We didn't want to bring in anarcho-capitalism because we were fans of Murray Rothbard on his not on his views on Israel, but on his views on sectarianism. And his attack on anarcho-capitalists who are sectarians is what they do when there's a dispute between Russia and Ukraine, or North Korea and South Korea, they just say, well, they're both countries,
Mm.
they're both states, and therefore they're both evil, and that's it.
Mhm.
And Murray says, look, we can do a little bit better than that if
Yeah.
I can put words in Murray's mouth. We don't want to be sectarians. We want to say, yes, yes, all governments are evil. They're all a bunch of gangsters. Yes, yes. However, certain governments are more evil than
Mhm.
other governments. Certain governments deviate more from anarcho-capitalism than others. And in order to do justice to that insight, you have to take something like a classical liberal government where there is a legitimate government in quotes, and it can have armies, courts, and police, and a few other things. And now we can say, well, which is worse?
Mhm.
And Murray and Hans Hoppe said, well, the Israel is worse.
Mhm.
And Hans's main buttress for this claim is to show Israel did this wrong, Israel did that wrong, Israel did the third thing wrong, and he is sometimes right, sometimes wrong.
Yeah.
But he never compares it to the
Indeed.
Arab countries
Indeed.
and says, well, did the Arab countries do it more wrong than Israel? That's just off the table for him.
Mhm.
So I, I, I like to think that if we had anarcho-capitalism and they were all adhering to libertarian theory, there'd be no more war. The Arab Defense Agency
Yeah.
say, Arabs, you're wrong. That would be my expectation
Yeah.
if we had pure anarcho-capitalism and it was based on Locke and homesteading theory. That would be my assessment of what would happen.
Yeah.
I don't believe it for a moment
No,
that
of
it would
course, yeah.
happen quite that way, but that would be the theoretical way of looking at it. But Alan and I are wearing these eyeglasses not of anarcho-capitalism, but of classical liberalism. There, yes, Israel made mistakes here and there and everywhere. They're imperfect people, sue them.
Yeah. Yeah.
But who's worse?
Yes.
And compared to, it's like a drop in the bucket compared to the whole bucket. Yes, Israel made a mistake here and there, but the Arabs they purposely target civilians.
Yeah.
On October 7th, they were aiming at civilians. Israel never aimed at civilians. Yes, there was collateral damage and it was regretted.
Yeah.
And it was due to the fact that they embed themselves and use them as shields.
Yeah.
So it's a gigantic, humongous difference between Israel and its enemies, and Israel is very much on the good side.
Yeah. I'll quickly say this just before Ellen. So there's just on the point of comparing. It's like having one beautiful brand new apple that's shiny and lovely. You bought it at the market, and the other one's a rotten apple, which you eat is going to kill you. And they're saying, oh, you see, they're both apples. Let's not look at the other one. Let's say this one here, it has a scratch on it. You bought both apples at the store, and the one is completely rotten, and the one you're complaining about is the one, it's not as good as the picture you have up there. You say it's going to be a perfect apple. It's not perfect. There's a bit of green on it. That's the first point. And the second point is on your, like how one is an evil group, one is not. Yes, people die from Israel's attacks, for sure. But who is not only glorifying the murder of people, uploading it themselves to say, this is what we accomplished. Not we took over this military base, but look at all those hideous pigs and vile monsters. We're killing each one of them. We're doing God's work, just like Hitler wanted to. He couldn't accomplish it, but we will, because we hate these Jewish people. Not only hate the Jews, but anyone who sides with them. We will kill Arabs. We will kill Muslims. We will kill people in Thailand. I mean, there's a video of this poor Arab. He's caught in a bomb shelter, and they grab him and they start shouting and screaming at him. And he's like, please take me to my family. And they're like, you disgusting pig, you sided with him. We're going to slit your throat. Shut up. And it's so vile and vicious. Nothing in the history of the Israeli state has ever come close to that. Ever. So the idea of comparing the two is completely wrong. Sorry, I kind of interrupted you, Alan, but I mean,
No, it's okay. I mean, yeah, the goal of Hamas is to kill as many people as they can while hiding among their own civilians. And the goal of Israel is to defend its civilians by attacking those that try to destroy them and kill them, and try to minimize at the same time the civilian casualties on the side that is attacking. So basically, that's the focus. But instead of that being the case, it's like, you know, like Hamas is out of the picture. Nobody's talking
Yes,
about
no one
Hamas
talks about Hamas.
intentions, Hamas intent. The only difference, the only fundamental difference between Hamas and the Nazis is a difference of capabilities.
Yes.
It's not a difference of intent. And fundamentally, because what we saw on October the 7th was a mass murder and a level of sadistic,
Yes.
intent
Yeah.
that is only comparable with the Einsatzgruppen
Yeah.
of the Nazis.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is where you see the true difference.
Yeah. And even there, it's the Nazis were never as flagrant. They couldn't broadcast this to the world. If they did, all their support, all the people who say, oh, you know, the silent pulpits, as I mentioned, they would have been like, that's hideous. You're denigrating these people and murdering them. But, you know, and so now we have this capability to do this, and they have even less place to hide yet. And yet, this is where you mentioned people justify it. And they can only justify that by having a very deep-seated hatred for people. You know, and you know, the segregation of Jews, it goes on forever. And even Hoppe says that wasn't a problem in one of his books, which I'm like, what? And then yet, oh no, it's open air apartheid prison camp in Gaza. No, it was not. It was not. That was not how it was handed over. It was not handed over like that at all. Israel put so much money into opening up trade routes to try and help these people to somehow flourish and not have to, because the image of us Westerners, including Israelis, was that, oh, they're poor, they have these bad conditions. That's why that must be why they hate us. Because, you know, the average person does not want to. We don't want to say these people despise everything that's good. And to a large extent, yeah, maybe, I don't know how many, but the percentage in Gazans, but it's enough where they support Hamas. They elected them, apparently, you know, that's up in the air whether they did, but the issue is not whether what Israel is doing is bad, but that it is justified. It cannot be said, in my opinion, morally, that it is not justified. You can't. I mean, and then there's the how well they've done it, given the constraints. That clearly they've put an enormous amount of effort into minimizing as much of Palestinians' lives, deaths as possible. Not only do they say get out, they say get out to this place that we have prepared for you. You know, just to add to your point earlier, they don't just say get out of the hospital or get out of the building. They say, well, we've provided for you. And then you have these phone calls to the IDF saying, look, we try to leave the building. The Hamas are shooting us outside. They're patrolling outside. Please bomb them or kill them. We want to leave, but we're trapped here. They want us to die because they don't just glorify Israeli deaths. They glorify the deaths of their own people. They call them martyrs. They impugn on them some sort of martyrdom when these people didn't want to die for Hamas, but oh no, making them die for it as well. That's our cause. Anyway, so that's been an hour. I'm sorry, a little more than an hour, but man, this topic we can just delve the depths, I think. I'll probably like another interview at some point.
Thank you.
I don't regard this as an interview. I regard this as a panel discussion.
Okay, good.
I regard your contributions, Danny, as roughly the equal of Alan's and mine. I think that your contributions were nothing short of magnificent. However,
it was a conversation.
It was a conversation, a panel discussion, which is fine. However, I have a suggestion. Doug Casey and Michael Reckenwald and Hans Hoppe. I've already offered Hans Hoppe a debate, and he has not seen fit. He has not condescended to even answer me.
Yeah.
What I would like in the future is to invite, and this time don't be a panelist, but just be a moderator and a timekeeper, and have Alan and me debate, say, Hans Hoppe and Michael Reckenwald, or any other two people who take the opposite point of view.
Yeah.
It's interesting that they are not willing to debate us, which speaks volumes silently.
Yeah, well, in any case, I mean, people, if they are curious, they can go to our book, they can go to our papers and articles, and to make up their own minds. And also, the people are able to read what our adversaries say on this topic and assess them on their own. If Mr. X says something, go and check it out.
Yes, indeed.
Google.
Yes, yeah,
So
you know, even as bad as Google is, at least it sometimes gives good results, right? So I would highly recommend everyone. This is the paper I'm reading at the moment is Walter Block and Alan Futerman's paper on this. Uh, Read it and make footnotes. And I've made lots of critiques of my own, and you go through it and you read it, and it's a very thoughtful, well, thoroughly researched uh, paper, and it's a great opinion. And I think anyone who's a libertarian or anarcho-capitalist who's ever even read Walter Block's previous works uh, should have no problem reading it. If someone can read Defending the Undefendable, which I think is a fantastic series, and not feel ashamed, right? If someone can read that and not feel ashamed, they can read this and not feel ashamed. That's my opinion. And that's where the rubber meets the road. This is, as much as theory is, you like theory, but it's the pragmatism of it. Like once society happens, then what? No, no, no. Libertarian theory gets pushed to the side, or non-aggression principle or defense. No, no, you can't. You have to have, they're linked. They're linked. And this is a good start. This is a very good start for anyone, I think, who wants to read on the topic. I'm going to try and get some panels going in the future. There's a couple of people I want to invite on various topics because this is an issue which I personally am very interested in, and I know everyone is interested in. And I know people don't want to put their name to it. They don't want to put their name to, oh, I debated the evil people because, I legitimized their opinion. But that goes down to the evil people, as you mentioned, Ellen. That I will put out emails. Walter Block, if you could help me, you have some weight behind your name. We need people to discuss it in the open, people who should be working together, because there is an issue. There is an issue. We need to have some sort of dialogue, but it's not happening. There's only one side, and that's not a dialogue, right? It's a propaganda campaign at that point. Right?
thank you so much for the invitation, Danny.
No, no. Anytime. I would love to interview both of you again. You, especially Alan, I'd like to ask you about your history and the other academic works you've done, because the perspectives are important, and I'd like people to know who Walter Block is.
Thanks for having us. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you. The pleasure's all mine. Bye bye.